This is a true story and it happened to a good friend of mine several years ago. It also serves as a warning to other single women out there to always be careful who you invite into your life or home before getting to know someone really well. My friend, I'll call her Michelle, lived in a town of about 50,000 people, out on the outskirts of town. Her house was a really cool, but creepy old house that had a huge front yard with a white picket fence. It was a 2-story home and the second story had a large walkout deck where you could go sit and have coffee and just kick back and relax with friends. As I mentioned, it was on the outskirts of town, so the lighting wasn't the best. You could sit outside and if it was dark, no one would know you were even there. Michelle was single. She had a daughter from a previous marriage and they lived in the large home alone with just their little 5-pound dog named Goofy. That was his real name. This was also before Facebook and eHarmony and all of those websites that helped people meet others. There was, however, MySpace, which Michelle had made a lot of new friends. One was a guy who I'll call Dave. No, it's not his real name, but to keep Michelle's real identity private, we'll say his name was Dave. She met him online and she said that at first, he seemed like a really great guy. It wasn't even a week and she had gave him her address and she told him to come by and have coffee sometime so they could visit and hang out. She wasn't a girl who was easy, by any means, but the very minute she gave him her address, he started making all kinds of dirty statements and made his intentions known pretty fast. She told him right away that she wasn't that kind of girl and some words were exchanged and one thing led to another and the next thing you knew, Dave was deleted as a friend and blocked. To put things into perspective, I don't remember exactly what year this was, but I'd say it was late 90s or very early 2000s. It was also fall, right before Halloween. Leaves were falling, the weather was getting colder and darker and again, big spooky house y'all. Single woman, alone. You can probably guess where this is going. One night, she looked out her front door and saw Michael Myers standing outside the gate of her fence. She nearly did a double take. Michael Myers? What the actual hell? She looked again and there Michael Myers stood, all 6 foot of him, standing out there, holding a large knife outside her fence maybe 150 feet away from her front door. She immediately locked the door and called the police. The police showed up within minutes and when they checked all around her house, there wasn't anyone there. They promised to do several drive-by patrols, but nothing was seen the rest of the night. She didn't get any sleep. The very next night, she looks out and there he is again. Just standing there staring straight at her front door. Knife in hand, just staring at her. Again, she calls the police, nearly in hysterics and again, by the time they show up, no one was there. Again, they tell her to lock her doors and windows and to call them if she saw them again. By the 3rd time this happened and again, no Michael, the police was starting to think she was doing it for attention and they acted like they didn't believe her. This is when she called me in tears. She didn't know what to do. I am a big guy. I can also defend myself or others when I need to. I decided to see for myself what was going on, but I also had a feeling from talking to her that I knew who it was. The timing of her abrupt break off with Dave and the timing of her Michael Myers dude showing up couldn't be a coincidence, but I didn't want to scare her. I did decide that I was going to mess with him though. A year before all of this happened, I was involved in a small movie project that called for a gun that shot blanks for one of the scenes. It looked real and sounded real, but was completely harmless. Dave, or Michael wouldn't know that though. I called Michelle and explained to her that if they saw my truck sitting out front, they probably wouldn't show up or try anything, so I told her to come over and pick me up and that I would spend the day hiding out at her house so that whoever it was, would not see me coming in or know that I was there. When it got completely dark, I camped out upstairs on the dark balcony. No one showed up. We decided to give it another night, no one showed up. We talked about it and she begged me to stay and at that point, I was even starting to question if maybe she wasn't either seeing things or wanting someone to just stay with her out of loneliness. I couldn't say no to a woman in tears though, so again, I stayed up all night on the balcony. At around 1 a.m. in the morning, who do you think came walking up to her fence and stood outside her fence looking in at her house? Yep, you guessed it. I waited to see what was going to happen. I pulled the gun with the blanks in it out of my pocket and slowly raised it straight up in the air as he unlocked the gate and started to walk towards her front door and I pulled the trigger. Oh yeah, it might be wise to tell you what kind of a gun it was. It was a 357. Yeah. One of the loudest and most powerful revolvers in the world. It sounded like a frickin' cannon going off. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to see Michael Myers literally shit himself from fright? I got to see it live that night. He let out a scream and started running back towards the fence, running smack dead into a tree and knocking himself nearly out. He got up and ran as fast as he could when I fired off a second round of blanks into the air as he ran straight into the fence, tripping over it and tearing into his mask and putting a big gash in the side of his head in the process. He ran down the street screaming. When the police came, they were torn between chewing me out for shooting what seemed like a real gun in town, which they said could have really scared the neighbors, and doubling over with laughter when they seen all the damage he had done to the fence and hearing the description of him running down the street, literally crapping himself while yelling for help. I told them who I thought it was and told them where he worked, and sure enough, the next morning when they arrived to talk to him, he had injuries consistent with what had happened. Of course, we couldn't prove that it was him beyond a certainty of a doubt, but one thing I can say is, Michael never came back. He'll probably think twice the next time he thinks about stalking anyone's house or donning that green jumpsuit and mask. All's well that ends well, y'all. Happy Halloween.